Hello and welcome to episode 36 of the Raising Musos podcast, where we help parents feel confident, informed, and inspired to support their child's musical journey. If this is your first time tuning in, my name is Eliza Bourgault and I'm actually the director of Music Makers Academy. We are a music school in Joondalup. And I started this podcast basically because I noticed that so many parents didn't really know anything about music education, and I was getting asked a lot of questions from parents, so I thought a podcast would be a perfect resource to give to them. So thank you for listening in, and I hope that this episode is going to help you and in that sense help your child as well. And today's topic is how to be a parent a teacher will enjoy working with. And I was looking through my notes. I made sort of similar episodes a while ago. It was episode 28 and 29 where I talked about sort of like the 10 golden rules of a music student. And you might think that today's episode is going to be like the same thing, but it's slightly different in the sense that the two previous episodes that I made back in July were more about the student, and today we're really honing in on the parent. So how to basically be a parent that, a person like me who's teaching a lot of lessons to a lot of different students, how to make that relationship between the parent and the teacher a really positive and collaborative one. And so it's not about like how to be a parent that, the teacher is going to love, or, how to not be a parent who's, we're going to dislike. But it's really about creating that relationship. Because when teachers and when parents are both on the same page, and there's sort of like a respectful relationship between them, that is so important for the success of a child learning music. And so hopefully, if you're listening, I assume you are a parent, you've got a child learning music, and so I assume that what you want for your child is that, they succeed with music. And so having a positive, respectful relationship with your child's music teacher can make a big difference. And so before I go on to, some of the behaviors you might want to think about, let me explain why that teacher-parent relationship is so important. So you have to understand, first of all, that music education is a long-term process, and it requires consistent support. Not just during an actual 30-minute or 40-minute lesson, but also in the home. And so obviously the support that students receive during a lesson comes from the teacher. And so that does mean that the support that a child gets when they're at home basically comes down to the parents. Because obviously the teacher cannot go to all the students' home to make sure that homework is getting done. And so parents are basically the ones who create the environment that allows the learning to stick through creating practice routines for the child, or a positive learning environment at home, or setting sort of practice expectations and things like that at the house. And so when a parent and a teacher are aligned in sort of expectations around lessons, around homework, around practice, even expectations around sort of maybe achievements and progress, also when they are aligned with communication and how to best support the child, everything basically just like runs like smoothly, like clockwork. And so then this has a very positive result for the child, who feels that they have like a very strong support system in place. The parents are interested and involved in what they're doing. Obviously, the teacher is very invested in their progress. And so basically the child, as a result of all of this, is more likely to stick with music, even through the more challenging parts of the journey. When the relationship between a parent and a teacher is a bit strained, a bit unclear, if there's frustration or maybe even burnout, well then, someone's gonna probably quit. Whether that's the parent has enough, or the teacher has enough dealing with the family, or the child just has enough because they're not making progress, because there isn't enough support being provided, either by the teacher or by the parent. And I've definitely as well seen this in my own sort of studio, when parents come in, they chat with the teacher at the end of a lesson. Even just like that sort of brief interaction is often is just like so positive. It builds a bit of connection with the parent, and then we can really sort of talk about what was covered in the lesson, and I think parents generally really appreciate this kind of feedback. But I'll be talking to you more about sort of the feedback that sort of we do at Music Makers Academy to sort of nurture this this relationship with parents, which is critical. And actually, I think I mentioned this in like the very, very first podcast as well. This is just again to reiterate how important having that relationship in place is. And this is from Irene Gorin. She is a quite famous piano teacher in the US, and I did one of her trainings, which was just like amazing. And so she actually talks about this parent to teacher relationship because she also believes it's important. And the way that she describes it is just using the image of a bird, and the bird is the student, and obviously their music journey is like the bird flying through the sky. But yeah, the bird has two wings, and the teacher is really just one of those two wings, and the other wing is the parent. And so if one of these wings is missing or is broken, it's not working properly, then like the bird just can't really do much, okay? And I think parents have the tendency to completely underestimate their impact, or the impact that they could have. And so hopefully this today's podcast sort of just reminds you that you have a big role to play in the success of your child's music education. So now we're going to get into the actual content, and so I've got 5 qualities or habits, if you like, that are going to really help nurture that respectful relationship with your child's teacher. And at the end, I'm also going to mention a few red flags you want to avoid doing, because they do strain a professional relationship with a teacher. So the first thing is to respect the teacher's time and expertise. This is, again, one that I actually had listed in those previous episodes about, the rules of an ideal student. So respecting the teacher's time and expertise. So obviously things like arriving to your lessons on time. It sounds like common sense, but you have no idea how often I, or even some of my tutors here, just wait for 10 to 15 minutes and the students just like hasn't showed up, and then they just arrive as if like nothing happened, but they're 15 minutes late, and it's such an awkward situation for us tutors because we have to keep to strict timelines. Often we're teaching students back to back. And so if you are arriving late, or if your child is arriving late, then we actually cannot do your entire 30-minute lesson if you're 20 minutes late, because then all the other lessons will be running late as well. If you are running late, look, things happen. Sometimes there's terrible traffic. Just send a message, to let the teacher know, so that they don't feel like you've just forgotten about the lesson, because that looks really bad and it just makes us feel like you don't really care, to be honest, or that you're not very committed to these lessons. Another way to respect your teacher's time and expertise is to respect policies around things like makeup lessons, cancellations, and payments. To be honest, there is such a wide variety of policies that teachers can implement. So whatever a teacher implements in the studio is obviously up to them. It's up to their personal situation. It's up to what's happening, in the studio. It's up to so many different factors that there isn't a right or wrong policy. It's just whatever the teacher decides, and you sort of have to respect that. It's very annoying having parents try to get their way and have policies almost written for them. It makes it very unfair on everyone, and it's a lot of time spent often arguing back and forth around whether you can have a lesson rescheduled when actually the policy says that you can't have makeup lessons. Or same things for payments as well. Maybe payments are due on a certain date and you're just I'll just pay it whenever I feel like it, but that puts a lot of pressure on the teacher to follow up with you. So it basically makes our life harder. And if you think about it, we as teachers, we would rather spend the time that we have on learning how to be a better teacher for your child, researching new resources that we can use to improve the lessons with your child, or we just want to spend more time doing, lessons. And so when we are getting bogged down by this unnecessary admin tasks that, just as a result of parents not respecting our time or our expertise, it just makes life really hard, and that means we can't actually improve as teachers because we have to spend our energy dealing with this instead. And then finally, in the same category, so another way to respect your teacher's expertise is to trust their professional judgment. Even if it's things that you probably might not want to hear, like your child's not actually making progress, your child's being disrespectful, your child's not yet ready for an exam. Obviously teachers will probably know better than you around things, about things like music and progress and where your child is at, unless, you are a music teacher yourself. But most parents aren't. So yeah, teachers, we love working with parents who are respectful of our time and who also trust our professional judgment and who can see that we have experience with what we do. So that's the first tip. So now the second way to be a parent that the teacher will enjoy working with is to be involved with music practice at home, but doing it in a way so that you are not taking over. And so as a parent, what you want to do is facilitate the practice at home, but you don't have to like run it or be there like every single minute, except maybe for like the very young students. So you want to be present, you want to be involved, but you don't want to be micromanaging your child either. And so some ways you can sort of achieve that is by, as I mentioned previously and in lots of different podcasts, it's to create a consistent practice routine for your child. So you just help them set up a timetable, and you have to make sure that music practice gets included in that timetable. Encouraging your child to complete their weekly tasks. And so, you could sort of check in maybe once a week after their lesson, what their homework is, and sort of every time they go to practice, just like prompt them to actually do the homework that was set by the teacher. Show interest in what they're learning. So maybe at the end of the practice session, just again, ask them what they've worked on, ask them to demonstrate what they've improved on. And then another thing that you might want to do to help improve their practice is just to redirect them or help them to refocus if you notice that they get distracted. So basically at the start of the practice session, you just ask them what their homework is. Throughout the practice session, if they seem distracted or lose the plot, you just gently bring them back in. And at the end of the practice session, you ask them to demonstrate what they've done. And so that way you are involved, you are showing interest in what they do, but you're still letting them like do what they need to do by themselves. And so that's a great way of doing a bit of support around practice at home. And it's definitely something that a teacher will notice and will be thankful for. And obviously the result here is that your child will be motivated and the teacher doesn't feel like they're undoing stress during lessons. Number 3 is to communicate openly, but also kindly. So if there's anything, you want to bring up with your teacher, we don't mind, we love hearing from you. And that could be maybe, that your child has had a tough week at school and so they're not going to be in the best mood when they arrive to their lesson, or maybe there just hasn't been much practice this week because of holidays or camps or whatever. Don't be afraid of communicating that, because we do, like to hear where our students are at, whether that's mentally or physically as well. That said, the way that you communicate to a teacher does, you have to sort of be considerate in how you communicate. Obviously, be honest, but you don't have to be confrontational. Showing curiosity rather than being critical of what your teacher is doing. Be solution focused rather than putting blame on the teacher or on anyone. So for example, if you find that your child's just not practicing very much, you could just send a short message like, "Hi, I've noticed that my daughter or my son's been reluctant to practice recently. Do you have any tips?" And so that's sort of quite an open question. It doesn't put blame on anybody, and it has a very sort of curious kind of attitude. So that actually leads to, now the teacher will be happy to collaborate with you, rather than, "Hey, I don't know why you are assigning this homework, but Maya's just not interested. Why did you do this?" where it's sort of very judgmental. You sort of sound critical of what the teacher's doing, which sort of implies that you're not respecting their judgment or expertise. And of course, the teacher is going to suddenly feel very insecure and they will want to defend their decisions, and that's when the relationship will start to deteriorate. So don't be afraid. So moral of the story is to not be afraid of communicating, but do it in a kind way. My fourth tip is to trust the long-term process. So probably, lots of parents will expect their child to become like mini virtuosos, like so quickly, but really, think of the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady progress will yield far better results than sprinting through grades. And so even if you're not visibly seeing any progress, sometimes there is still some kind of progress happening. It might just not be the kind of progress you expect or you even have any awareness of. And music development is not always in a straight line. Like sometimes it takes a while for students to grasp a concept or a technique, and then one day, after like months of struggle, it sort of clicks. And so you don't want to give up when things are still like marinating, in your child's brain, and you find that they're struggling or they're not making progress, because it might just click a little bit later on down the track. And so even if you feel like there's no progress being made, just don't lose that kind of long-term vision, because really you just have to think of learning music as a long-term thing. And don't forget as well that when, whilst we're still working on something and it feels hard or you can't really see progress, your child is still like learning things that you might not have thought about. So things like resilience or the discipline to keep going even when it feels like you're not getting better at anything. So there's still things happening in that experience, even when on the outside it looks like nothing is happening, there is still something happening. So just like trust that kind of process. So another way that you can be an excellent parent, that a teacher will love working with you, is to celebrate your child's successes, no matter how big or small they are. I have a young student, and when he finishes a small piece, it might just be like 8 bars long, and he can do it from memory. Like the dad's just like clapping and like and it's so cool because like the child is like really proud of himself and it's really exciting. And so any small win, like you just have to make, especially with young children, you just have to make a big deal out of them, because for them, like that could actually have been quite challenging. And we just think because we're adults and we think that this is easy, we sort of underestimate how much effort was required to achieve that thing. So find small wins to really celebrate and to really highlight, because children will really get excited and about, people celebrating them. So yeah, just be aware and be mindful of what your child achieves, because they're really going to, appreciate being celebrated. And teachers should do it as well. I mean, I'm always, congratulating my students when they finish a piece. I tell them they've done really good work, they get a sticker. Celebration is important. So basically, these are the five ways to be a really cool music parent. So let me just go through those five again. Number one, it was to respect the teacher's time and also their expertise and professional judgment. Number two was to support home practice, but also like not micromanaging, just being present. Number three was to communicate with your tutor in a respectful, curious, open manner that enables collaboration between the both of you. Number four was to trust the long-term process of learning music and to continue investing in lessons, not giving up on practice, even if you feel or you sense that there's no progress being made, because sometimes the progress sort of just clicks in later. And number five is to celebrate your child's achievements, no matter how big or small they are. And so if you sort of do these five behaviors, frequently and consistently, your child is really going to thrive, and the teacher is going to feel that you are working with them rather than against them, and it's going to make your teacher's experience a lot more positive, comfortable, and inspiring for them, which psychologically what will happen is they will be even more passionate about teaching your child. They will commit even more. They will just become a better teacher for your child because they have the confidence, they have the evidence that you are just as committed as they are and that you're on the same page as them. And that is really amazing. And that's when your child, and you'll see it, I guarantee you, I guarantee you, if you do these five things, your child, it's like there's almost there's no chance that your child will fail unless your child just like doesn't practice, okay? So there you go. These were the five. Now, as I said in the intro, I also want to list a couple of like red flags, so like things you don't want to do if you don't want to be a beep. So okay, I just got like four. So the first one is to you just drop your child off and then you leave and you don't really engage with the teacher. So as I said, that sort of shows you're not interested. You're not even interested in hearing like the teacher's perspective on your child's progress. So it's just it just sort of communicates a lack of interest from you. And as I said, that's not exactly a good thing. It's really good when parents show interest in what their child's doing. Second one is it's sort of like the opposite of the spectrum. So on one hand, it's like you're not interested, you just like drop your kid and you leave and you pick them back up, and like you don't ever see the teacher, you don't you don't check in with them at all. And so that's sort of like not great. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have a parent who's attending all the lessons, who's like sitting in on the lessons, who might be interrupting the lessons, correcting your child mid-lesson. Like, it's great that you are showing so much interest, but be careful that you're not being a little bit too controlling and too, again, like sort of that micromanagement. You sort of have to let your child learn by themselves in a way. And if you're sort of always there checking what they're doing, especially in a lesson kind of setting when the teacher is already there, you're actually not enabling your child to learn by themselves, to be independent. So it's great to just check in at the start or at the end of a lesson, but you don't have to actually be there during lessons, especially if you're going to be interrupting to correct your child as they're having their lesson. Another red flag is to constantly be asking your teacher, you know, oh, what is my child doing an exam? Especially like before your child is actually ready. And again, I think lots of parents underestimate how long it takes to be ready for an exam. And I still to this day get a lot of pressure from parents who want their child to do an exam and the child's just like not ready. And I still don't know how to manage this situation, by the way. Remember, first of all, exams are not like important. Secondly, there's so many other things to learn than just exam repertoire. And thirdly, like, the best way of doing an exam is to actually sort of be almost at the next grade, and then you do the previous grade's exam, because then you'll sort of like learn the repertoire really quickly. So yeah, don't pester your teacher about exams because your child just simply might not be ready. It's okay to just ask them like, hey, do you think my child could do an exam? Or like, how soon? Or like, you know, when do you think my child could do an exam? But if you're just always like repeatedly going, hey, like, is it time for the exam? Like, yeah, just take it slow. Again, remember, it's the long-term process. And then a final red flag is to compare your child to others in a way that puts pressure on either your child or the teacher. So, you know, and I do that too, actually. I sort of compare my students to other students. And I'll give you a little example. There is a young pianist in Perth. I think her name is Maya, okay? She is being taught at the Muso Music Academy, which is sort of they have a viral Instagram page. And she's actually like a viral as well. So she has her own little Instagram account with over 1,000 followers. And she's like 6 or 7 years old, playing grade 6 or whatever. So she's like very advanced for her age. And it's so tempting to just look at all her videos of her like amazing playing and go, oh my gosh, like why are my students not like that? Or, you know, as a parent, you would see this and go like, why is my child like still just doing like such simple songs? And well, I found out that this Maya girl doesn't watch TV. Like, she does not get any screen time. And so, like, is your child like watching screen? Like, do they have screen time? I bet you they probably do. Playing video games, watching cartoons, playing on their iPads, like whatever it is. I bet you that like 99% of my students get screen time. And this kid like doesn't. And so you're comparing like the progress and the results of two children who have such different upbringing, such a different childhood. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just saying it's very different. So comparison is useless in this context. So keep that in mind. Also, what you see on social media is often, you know, it's not always authentic, it's not always honest. So don't really like use social media videos to compare your child to someone else, because it's just not an honest representation. So that's all for this podcast. If you're a parent, please let me know what you thought of this podcast. What is a new kind of behavior you want to start showing towards your teacher, or maybe at home with your child? Please let me know in the comments. And thanks again for listening. I will speak to you in the next episode coming out next week.